It is, what is it? It's Tuesday, April 19, year of our Lord, 2022. And I am trying to figure out, as I always am at this point in the day, how to make Zoom work. Zoom. So we're live. There we go. I've got Zoom up. Now I'm going to admit some folks in Zoom, in the Zoom room. Hey there, everybody. Welcome in the Zoom room. Can we do a sound test? Can you tell me if you can hear me? I see it. Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, let's see. Someone has been in my Zoom. They've rearranged the look, and now I have to figure out how to put it back the way I want it. Let me admit everyone. We're going to talk about tax-advantaged investing today. So let me get everybody entered, and then we'll get ready to begin. View. Okay. If you have any questions on Zoom, if you want to chat those in, that'll be helpful. We're going to give it a few minutes. It's 10:01 a.m., so we have plenty of time here. Let's see. Yeah.
I think if you right click on your box, there's three dots like where your thing is.
Right there?
Yeah, it should say like hide non-video participants.
Hide. Hide. I see hide selfie. What pin? You're right, though. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get my Zoom to show my screen and not everyone, all the participants.
Would you hit more on the bottom?
Hit more on the bottom.
You can like pin your video, but
So that's weird. So hopefully I can get this fixed. I'm going to try pinning that. Did that work? No. It didn't really.
I think it's actually that view button, the view in the top right. Your like the box, like where all the names are to the right.
Oh, where all the names are?
Back on Zoom, but if you go up a little bit, and then take up go to the left, yeah, like go up right there where your mouse is.
Right.
Right there, it says view.
View speaker?
I thought it would change it to.
Yeah, me too. Let's do full screen. There, that's good. Is that good? Are you still seeing? Yeah. I think that's better. Is that better for you?
Yeah.
So, okay. Hey there. It's Ruth? No,
Cindy.
Cindy, sorry. Good to see you. Are we ready to begin? It is 10:04, so we have another minute or so. Can you see this on Aiden? No. Yes, you do see that. I think I'm going to close that. See if I can close that. Okay. Fun. Now I'm looking for questions in Zoom. I don't see any, so I'm going to close the chat box. It is April 19th. Yesterday was tax day. Officially, tax day in 2022 was on Monday because April 15th, which is usually tax day, which is always my birthday, tax day, April 15th, was on Good Friday. So we didn't have tax day on Friday because it was Good Friday, so it was moved forward to Monday, which means yesterday was actually tax day, which is probably the busiest day of the year for people in my business. And it was definitely a busy day for me. So I'm prepared because we didn't have class last week, so I had a whole extra week to prepare. Sorry about the disruption last week. We had some issue. Well, we didn't have some issues. We had one issue. I posted the wrong due date for the assignment in Blackboard. It didn't sync up with the syllabus. So I had a few students comment that they were out of sync and they weren't going to be able to get it in time. So I felt like I owed it to them to say, okay, we'll give you another week. The problem with that is this week's lecture and this week's assignment really, I didn't want to spread those out. So I couldn't make another assignment. I didn't feel good about that. So we just took a week off. So now we're back. We have this week, we're going to talk about tax advantaged investing. We're going to talk about tax allocation, and I'm going to show you how you're going to update your plan to reflect some tax advantaged investment accounts. Today we're going to talk about types of accounts, and we are really close to the end of the semester. So we have the capstone assignment coming up. I've had some students reach out to me to ask for some additional help on the capstone assignment. And one student asked, and I don't see the question, let me admit some more students. One student asked, and I forgot the student's name, sorry, but if you are that student, now would be a good time to speak up. He asked, I think it was he, I'm pretty sure it was email, but the question was, can we have a workshop, a capstone workshop? And so I like that idea. I think I want to do that, but I wanted to have a little conversation with you all about what that would look like, how we would do that, how we would make that capstone workshop an effective tool for you to, my priority is to help you learn more about financial planning and how you can really apply to your own life the principles and the process that we've been working on all semester. That's my goal. But I know your goal is to get an A in the course, and since the capstone assignment is worth 200 points, obviously if we have a workshop, capstone workshop, that would need to be focused on how can I help you get as many points as possible and have as few deductions as possible on your 200-point capstone assignment. So I think that makes sense to consider doing a capstone workshop as opposed to another lecture in this course. So that's what I'm throwing out there based on one question from a student. I liked it. I think it's a good idea. I think I might want to do it every semester. I try to do something like that every semester as we get ready for the final assignment, which is the capstone. But today, before I get into today's lesson, I thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to shut up and listen and hear what you have to say about this whole idea of a capstone workshop with those two goals in mind, my goal and your goal, which are always a little different. Maybe. Some of you share my goal. And those of you who share my goal, you just want to learn about personal finance and financial planning. You've done a great job. You're already probably really close to earning an A. But some of you are struggling just a smidge on a few things. And so the workshop would basically be one stone that kills two birds with one stone. So who wants to speak up here in front of me with a comment? Yes, Aiden, thank you. I was hoping.
Are you suggesting the workshop would replace the next lecture? Or
Yeah.
a lecture?
No, the next lecture. Yep. That's what I'm thinking, but I'm open to. So what I could do, is actually planned, is to come here next week, sit in the classroom twice, the 10 o'clock and the 11:30, and do basically kind of a preview and some highlights and a review of the course, which is really what the capstone is. It's like a review of the whole course, but the workshop and if I do it before you do the capstone, it would be also a preview, like another opportunity for you to look at all, make sure you have all the boxes checked in your planning portal to make sure that when you snap together and put it all together for your capstone assignment, you know you've got all the boxes checked and the data cards are correct and your plan looks decent and you're not subject to any big deductions. So does that answer your question, Aiden?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea because there's a couple little details in the Bayrock portal that I missed, and I just want to make sure that every tab is filled in.
Yeah. Cool. So Aiden said there were a couple little details in the Bayrock plan that he missed, and he wants to make sure that he gets those completed before he puts together his capstone assignment. I think that's a great idea. And based on that comment, here's what I think I need from you in order for me to commit to deliver a capstone workshop that will achieve your objective and my objective. And again, those objectives are very simple. Mine is I want to help you have an overview of what is a financial plan, how do you build one, and how do you actually create one and have one. That's what the capstone is for me. It's like, okay, if you get this, then you walk away from this course with a good understanding of all of the basic pieces of a financial plan. And so I'll be doing a review of that in this workshop. But number two is what Aiden said and what I know you really want, which is an opportunity to make sure you're not missing anything. So in order for me to say I can do this and I can deliver both of those objectives, I need Aiden to send me an email to say, here are a couple details that I'm missing, that I'm just not sure about, and then I will put those throughout the week. I will grab those emails that you send me. I'm not just Aiden, but I need to know that you guys want this workshop enough to say, here's what I'm missing. Now, I could put you on the spot now, or I could say, next week we'll do the workshop, have your questions ready. I could do that. That's one way we could do it. But I prefer being able to work on this kind of, in advance, which means I need your help. I need you to send me your questions, the areas that you're already aware of that you're not sure about. So I will take all of those and I will put them together so that everybody benefits from everybody's questions. But you got to send me questions. Does that make sense? So now my question is, does that sound like a capstone workshop that you would want to participate in? In meaning, will you send me your questions so that I can make it better? And I'm looking now at the chat box to see who's, I really like that idea. I think it would help. Thank you, Fanisa. Good idea, Emily says. Kevin Tovar says he got here at 10:03 a.m. So Kevin, welcome. Any other? Yeah, I just see yeah. Okay, thanks, Vanessa. Okay, so so far the comments are overwhelmingly overwhelmingly sparse. There aren't that many of them. So what about you guys? What do you think, Cindy?
I think it's a good idea, but what lecture would you
Be replacing? Yeah, there's no lecture that's being replaced.
Okay.
The end of the semester is all about the capstone. It's all about reviewing what we've learned and trying to help you solidify the basic principles of financial planning and the process that we've learned along the way. So there's really, I'm not eliminating any content. That's a great question, Cindy. So that's the answer, is that I'm not really eliminating anything. I'm just using a different format to try to complete the lecture that I would normally do. And we'd just turn it into a workshop, kind of a final workshop. You have 2 weeks to do the capstone assignment. So doesn't mean, I'll still be available if you have questions as you're doing your capstone. And maybe we do another workshop after the assignment goes live. But yeah. So hey there, nice to see you. I'm sorry you couldn't make it on time, but I'm really glad you made it. So we're talking about a capstone workshop. I'm actually considering doing next week kind of a review, preview, we're calling it a capstone workshop to make sure that you have all the boxes checked for your capstone assignment, and I want to make sure that I do a good job reviewing what we learned, what we taught this semester in terms of personal finance and financial planning. So that's what we're talking about. If you have any comments, suggestions, feel free to speak up before we jump into today's lecture. Thank you, Diana. I appreciate that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the same conversation with my 11:30 class, and I'm going to assume that I'm a good enough salesperson. At this point, I'm committed to do the workshop. So now I have to sell you guys on the way we're going to do it. Number one, I need you to send me your questions, any details that you're aware of in your own financial plan that you're not really 100% confident about. Just send that question to me, and I'll make sure that I make that part of the capstone workshop review. So if you have any questions or you're struggling with any piece of your financial plan, this is the week that your class collaboration points will be to send me your question. So I'm going to now put some incentive behind, and this is how I sell stuff, the carrot and the stick. So this week's assignment, which is not yet posted in Blackboard, will include your class collaboration, which is you posting your question. What area of your financial plan do you need a little help on? And that will be this week's class collaboration. So in my next class at 11:30, I'm going to have the same conversation in half the time. And I'm going to make this final suggestion, and that is that we meet remotely next week, because I'm only going to do this workshop summary once. I'm going to post it. I will be happy to be live on the Zoom meeting at 10 a.m. next week in case anyone wants to ask questions. I'll be available and I'll be there answering questions, but it will basically be a video that I hit the play button on. It'll be pre-produced so that I have time to create really good, helpful content. I think I can have it pre-produced, but if not, I'll be ready to go over everything and I'll be creating the video at the same time. But what I don't want to do, what I'm not planning on doing, is trying to do that workshop twice. Is that fair? So here's my reason for that, or it's not my reason, it's my justification. This semester has been very difficult for me because at the beginning, remember, we did the soft launch, and that means they gave instructors the opportunity to either meet in class or do it online, and so then I took a vote. Remember the vote? How'd the vote come out? Both. Yeah, and I'm like, that wasn't really an option, but then I thought, okay, I'll give you that option. I will do both. So all this semester, I've been here pretty much twice on Tuesday for the 10 o'clock and 11:30, and we've had a pretty overwhelming attendance, right? It's not really been overwhelming, but it's been fun. It's been good, but it's been a lot of work for me. So I'm asking for your permission and your blessing next week for me to invest the time to prepare the workshop and not have to come to class, because it's a lot of extra work for me to try to do two classes. So I'm going to try to combine it and make it better. Is that cool with everybody that's in front of me? And hopefully if you will chime in about that on Zoom, that would be great, because what that means is I will do the workshop at 10 a.m. next week. That should work for you guys just fine. My 11:30 class, that's where I'm going to have to sell it to them, and I will do my best, and I think they'll be cool with it. But that's the deal. Okay, cool. No more conversation about what's coming next week. Now let's jump into today's lesson. And today's lesson is really about, I call it tax allocation, a bucket strategy, and I want to show you why I call it the bucket strategy. And this is I've been teaching this from the very beginning because I think in terms of buckets. So I'm going to teach you about some buckets. When I talk about tax advantaged investing, it's all about types of accounts. And that's what today's lesson, and that's what you're going to learn this week in the homework that you do. you're going to learn about these different types of accounts. And I'm going to use buckets to illustrate it. So this picture is a picture I took with my iPhone 7 Plus, the first iPhone that had a dual camera thingy, and I thought that was pretty cool. I should have taken it with my iPhone 13 Pro Max. It would have been even better. But anyway, this picture is just a picture of the buckets that I'm going to talk about. And this is the big blue bucket, and we'll get to the little shovel shortly. But for now, I just want you to know we're going to talk about buckets. I'm going to teach you about types of accounts that relate to tax-advantaged investing. You need to understand that the type of account you're investing in makes a big difference in terms of building wealth. So, over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about investment strategies, and I taught you about 4 investment strategies that were designed to help you maximize returns and minimize risk. And those 4 investment strategies were: number 1, diversification. I told you a story about Enron investors and how they put too much of their account, their 401k and their investment, into one company stock, Enron. And that stock, that company went foof Barbados. And when that happened, they lost a lot. Not only did they lose their income, they lost their life savings. I told you the story about Bill, who worked there, who was a mid-level exec, lost everything, had stress, anxiety, heart attack, died, left his widow with nothing. That's Enron. I told you this story about Andrea. I may have changed the name. She was smarter. She said, I'm not putting all my money in one company. She came out smelling like a rose. So that was diversification, the number 1 investment strategy designed to help you minimize risk and maximize return. Number 2 was asset allocation. The single most important determinant of your portfolio's returns is asset allocation. And to understand asset allocation, you have to understand asset classes. So there was a quiz on that. Large cap, small cap, mid cap, bonds, different asset classes move around differently. That's the second investment strategy designed to help you maximize returns and minimize risk. Number 3, remember what number 3 was? Dollar cost averaging. And what was the story? One of my favorite stories about a farmer named Joe. Remember the farmer named Joe? He started buying cows, and the price of cows dropped, and then went up, and he bought 19 cows. He sold them all, made a lot of money, and that was dollar cost averaging. In my opinion, dollar cost averaging is the most powerful investment strategy for younger people, hands down. If you learn that, if you just understand that strategy and naturally put it into place in your 401k, which is what you're automatically doing when you set up that perfect investment. Do you remember the perfect investment? That's your 401k. That's a type of account. And the reason it's the perfect investment is because your company is matching your contribution. If it's an 8% match, which would be really, really good, and you make $100,000 a year, you put $8,000 a year into your 401k because you're smart enough to know that that's the perfect investment, that you're automatically going to get 100% on that 8%. In other words, you make $100,000, you put $8,000 into your 401k, you automatically make $8,000. Which means you doubled your investment. That's 100% return. That's why it's the perfect investment. And oh, by the way, when you do that, you're automatically doing dollar cost averaging because your money's going into the stocks that you're buying, whether they're ETFs, exchange traded funds, mutual funds, index funds, or regular stock like company stock. Either way, you're buying them a little bit at a time every week when your check gets deducted for your 401k. So dollar cost averaging is the most powerful investment strategy for young people over your lifetime. If the market tanks, which it will, it doesn't matter. You keep doing it. I promise you it's going to work out really well. The fourth investment strategy designed to help you maximize returns and minimize risk is portfolio rebalancing. And just think of a pie with 4 quarters, and each of those quarters is a different asset class, like large cap, small cap, international, bonds. Well, trust me, those asset classes are going to go up and down over time. And when you rebalance that portfolio, it's like using dollar cost averaging because you're buying stuff at a discount and you're selling stuff that's grown. Remember Farmer Joe's cows. So those are the 4 investment strategies, along with the perfect investment that you should already have in your mind. So today, as we move forward into tax buckets or tax allocation or tax advantaged investing, I just want you to understand that if you apply those strategies in the types of accounts you're going to learn about this week, you're going to be even further ahead because you're not going to have to pay tax on your gains. And that turns out to be a seriously important piece of building wealth. So tax advantaged investing is all about types of accounts. Now, I want to tell you a story. It's a story about a guy named JD. I may have told you this story already, but I want to tell you this story one more time. So remember, I was a State Farm agent. I was the first certified financial planner in the Houston area who could charge money for advice, for financial planning advice. And so remember what I learned? I worked in Clear Lake, and my office was positioned really close to a really nice couple of neighborhoods. And what was my assumption about all the people that lived around my office? Because they lived in super nice houses. They drove new cars, really nice cars. What was my assumption about everyone? That they were rich. They were richer than me. I lived in a small neighborhood. I drove an old minivan because I had 3 kids, and I just figured that they were rich and I was not. But I was working on it. And then one day, this dude comes into my office. His name's JD. JD and I had coached Little League together for years. He drove the old minivan. He lived in the same neighborhood I did. And I was assuming that he had to be like me. Not really, I had just started becoming a State Farm agent, so I hadn't made piles and piles of money just yet. And so when I met with JD, I was like, he's got to be just like me. Oh, okay, I'll help you. I'll do my best because he's a great guy and I wanted to help him. He lays down his stuff being his account information. And I'm like, dude, you've got over $1 million saved. He's like, yeah, you think, am I doing okay? I just want a second opinion because I've been doing this on my own all this time. And he said, this is what he said. This is what created the second law of personal finance in this course. This is the conversation where the light went off for me, and I recognized that what JD did, his whole approach to investing and building wealth and saving, his whole approach is summarized in tax advantaged investing. And here's what he said. He said, Jim, I didn't really know what I was doing, but when I started working, when I got a job out of college, I decided that, the IRS makes the rules. Like, they tell you how much money you can invest in an IRA. Do you know what an IRA is yet? You're going to learn that this week. Most people say it's an individual retirement account. That's not actually what it is. It's actually an individual retirement arrangement. Doesn't matter though. IRA, individual retirement account. The IRS makes the rules about how much you can contribute. And so JD said, because they said I could only invest this much, he said, I figured that'd be a good idea, so I did that. And then when they changed the rules and make it more, I would do that. He said, and they did this 401k at work and they matched it. So I definitely started out putting in as much as I could match. And then I actually put in as much as I was allowed to because the IRS made the rule. And I figured, they're only going to let you do so much because they don't want to give away tax deductions. So they're only going to let you put so much in your 401k. So I did as much as I could in my 401k. And my wife, he said, she doesn't work. She's never worked. She's always taking care of the kids. And so the IRS makes the rule that because she doesn't earn income, she can use my earned income and we can put money in her IRA. And then in 1998, they came out with this thing called a Roth IRA. He said, Jim, it's tax-free. It's the only tax-free investment ever. They came out with that in 1998, and I think it was $5,000 you could put in. And he said, and since my wife could put in $5,000 because of my earned income's important. It's a question on the quiz. So he said, because my wife could contribute to her Roth IRA tax-free, we started doing that instead of the tax-deductible IRA because I was getting a big deduction by doing my 401k at work and getting that match. So that's my plan, Jim. But like I said, I've been doing it on my own. I don't really know if it's working great or if there's something I'm missing or if there's something I should be doing. I'm like, dude, you're doing awesome. I'm going to start doing what you're doing. Because that's like the most simple, straightforward, rock and roll wealth building plan you could ever articulate. The JD plan. I mean, it was awesome. It was so simple, it's scary. And I started that day trying to simplify everything and just be like, okay, let's do this. Let's make sure you got the right types of accounts set up so that as you're building wealth, as you're saving over time, as you're using these investment strategies that you just learned, you're basically doing that inside of tax advantaged accounts. So that's where these buckets come from. So you look at this picture right here and you see a shovel. Let me tell you what the shovel means, by the way. Does anybody want to take a guess at what the shovel is? It's very important in the wealth building machinery. Nobody? Shovel? So I guess I didn't tell this story, but when I was like 10, I lived with my mom and dad, which was nice having a mom and dad, except they made a lot of rules, boundaries, and limitations. And one of them was we got our tennis shoes at Kmart. I don't even know if Kmart exists anymore anywhere, but they had these Converse tennis shoes. They were canvas. Anybody know what a Converse tennis shoe is? Do you know what a canvas Converse tennis shoe is? Well, back in the day, they were very cheap. You could get them for $4 at Kmart. And so with 4 kids in the family, one was a girl, so she really didn't get the tennis shoes. We got to choose, though, if we wanted black or white. I always chose white because we could wash them and they didn't smell as bad. Anyway, that was life back in the day. So we had these Converse canvas tennis shoes. And then this dude came out named Julius Irving. They called him Dr. Dunk. And he endorsed these leather Converse tennis shoes. I think it was the first pair of leather tennis shoes ever. And I'm like, I want those. The problem was they cost $10 at Kmart. Not 4, but 10. Begging my mom for the Converse that are leather, the high tops. She's like, you got to ask your dad. I'm not doing, you got to ask your dad. She knew dad would be like, don't bother me with that. Like dad was you didn't go ask dad stupid questions like that, right? But anyway, I went to ask my dad. My dad was like, I'll make you a deal, Jim. He said, you want the $10 Converse? I can't afford to do that for all 3 of you guys, and I want to be fair. So he said, you see that snow shovel right there? It was winter time, and it had just snowed a lot. It was Saturday. And he said, I'll let you borrow my snow shovel. You go knock on doors. I was a big 10-year-old, okay? He said, go to the neighbors, knock on their door, and ask them if they want you to shovel the snow off their driveway. And then ask them what they'll pay you to do that. And if you come up with enough money, you pay the difference. That means you need to earn $6. And then you can have your leather tennis shoes. Rock on! I took the shovel. I came back later that day, almost dark, exhausted, with a wad of money in my pocket. From that moment on, I was an entrepreneur. I knew how to make money. The shovel represents whatever it is out there in the world that needs to be done, the work that needs to be done, that you are equipped to do. Now, I was a 10-year-old kid with a lot of weight behind me for a 10-year-old, and I was strong enough and smart enough to know how to shovel snow. And I wasn't afraid to knock on the door and hope that I'd win the lottery and that you would pay me $10 for your big driveway. And people kept saying yes. So much that I had to get some help. I had to get some friends who would bring their shovel and help me. And I'd go knock on the next door. And then once I sold that job, I'd go back and help them finish the other job. I'm telling you, from that moment on in my life, I always had money. When my parents needed to borrow money, they would borrow money from me, literally. Not a lot of money, but like money for bread or whatever. If my mom didn't have enough money, she would say, "Can I borrow some?" I always had cash. So that's what the shovel is. And so I want you to think about that, because earned income is key in these in a Roth IRA and an IRA. You have to have earned income. And so I want you guys just to think about earned income as something you earn by doing something where you add value out there in the market. That's what this shovel's about. Now, this is a big plastic bucket. And you know what? I put these buckets in my car, and I actually have these buckets, and I bring them to class every time I teach this, but today I forgot because I have pictures of them instead. But that big blue bucket, it's plastic. What I want you to know about that is there's nothing special about this bucket except that it's unlimited. So there's no tax benefits in this bucket. That's why it's big and blue and plastic. So there's no way to protect the assets that are in this bucket for things like lawsuits, bankruptcy. These assets are not protected. They're in a non-tax qualified bucket. It's an important bucket. You can do some things in this bucket you can't do in other buckets. For example, has anybody ever heard of selling a stock short? Well, to sell a stock short, you have to be in an account that has margin, because there's no bigger risk in investing than selling something short. Do you know why? Actually, the most risky investment strategy there is selling a naked call. It's like selling a stock short, but it's like, here's the reason there's so much risk if you sell a stock short. And this is why you have to have margin in your account, because you could quickly lose a ton of money, because what's the limitation on how high a stock can go? There is absolutely no limit on how high a stock can go. So let's say that today you decide, oh, Twitter is having a really bad situation going on. The poison pill, yada, yada, yada. I want to short Twitter. And you could. And I'm thinking it's probably not a bad stock to short. But have you ever heard of GameStop? Or AMC? These are companies that had absolutely no reason whatsoever for going up, because the business model was outdated, the fundamentals weren't great at all, but they went shooting up. Why? It's a long story. I could explain it to you, but I'd need more water. My point is that you just never know what's going to happen. In this plastic bucket, you can make a lot of money, but you're going to pay tax on everything you make, and you can lose a lot of money. So this bucket is important to understand. It's called the non-taxable bucket. Okay? That's the biggest bucket. If I had all these buckets, I would show you. They would be inside of, like, the big brown bucket I'm about to talk about now would be inside of the plastic bucket. So yes, sir, Aiden has a question.
The blue one is the Roth IRA.
No, the blue one is no IRA. It's non-tax qualified. There's nothing about it that gives you any tax benefit at all. The big blue bucket is just the bucket that you can put as much into it as you want. There are no rules, no boundaries, no limitations in terms of what you can put in that bucket. It's all your assets. It could be a bank account. It could be, it could be a brokerage account where you're buying stock, but it's not tax qualified. That's the type of account that it is. It's not tax qualified. And it could be a bank account. It could be a brokerage account. It's just not tax qualified. Okay, that's the first type of account you need to understand, because that type of account is then distinguished against all of the other types of accounts that are somehow tax advantaged, which we're going to talk about next. So, Aiden, what do you think the big brown bucket might be? No, he doesn't know. Anybody have a thought? Okay, so let me just tell you, the big brown bucket is the 401k. Now, when I say 401k, remember JD's story? He worked for a company, and that company had a retirement program. And most companies that are for profit have a 401k plan. But if you work for the government, it's a different type of plan. I think it's a 457 plan. If you're a teacher or you work for a nonprofit, they don't have a 401k. They have something similar like a 403b, and these numbers are nothing more than a paragraph header in the IRS code, which is like 1 billion pages long. So the IRS code is what determines the rules, boundaries, and limitations for every type of account. So again, the 401k is the most common, but if you're a government worker, it's a different number, because it's a different paragraph with a few different variations. If you're a teacher, a nonprofit, it's a 403b, but it's the same thing. The big brown bucket represents the company retirement plan, okay? And the 401k, the perfect investment, that's what this brown bucket represents. The reason it's big, it's not as big as the blue bucket, because the blue bucket can just be huge. It can be but this one's limited. So it's big because the 401k, like JD taught me, is the tax advantaged type of account that you can put the most money in. So it's a big brown bucket. Make sense? Let's see what's next. So then after the big brown bucket, we have what I call the IRA. It's just an IRA, a traditional IRA. So I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions so far. We've talked about the non-tax qualified bucket. We've talked about the 401k bucket, the one you get at work that you contribute to, and that you get in the 401k, the case of the 401k, the perfect investment, you get a company match. And now I'm introducing you to the next bucket, which is called the IRA, the traditional IRA, individual retirement account, or technically individual retirement arrangement. So any questions so far? Let me see if I'm going to go into the chat, and I don't see any questions, but I'm looking. If you have a question and you're in Zoom, now's a good time to post it. I'm not seeing any questions. Any questions here in the classroom filled with hundreds of very vibrant faces, except Ashley. She looks like she maybe needs a nap. Don't you, Ashley? I know it's not riveting stuff, but it's good to see you. I love your smile. Okay, no questions. Let me ask a question. My question is, if I work for a company and I'm getting this match, and then I leave that company, what happens to that 401k account? It comes with you? Is that what you said?
Instead of match? Or are you saying just the account itself?
Well, both. That's a great distinction. What happens to the match and what happens to the account? So those are two questions. Aiden. Yeah, that's where you talk about a rollover IRA. And when I show you this bucket, it's not the big brown bucket, but it's the other bucket. That bucket, the IRA, it's a big metal bucket. It's a tax-advantaged account, and it is the receptacle. It is the type of account that you would roll over your old 401k into, and then you would have an IRA account, a traditional or rollover IRA, because you rolled over the money from your 401k from your old employer into this new account, which is very similar, but it's not an employer account now. It's your individual retirement arrangement, and it's an IRA. So the next question was, what about the match that you got from your employer while you were contributing to your 401k? And what do you think happens to those funds? You get to keep them, but you don't get to match anymore. In fact, you don't even get to contribute anymore to that 401k because you've terminated. You can't roll over those funds until and unless you terminate from that company. Does that make sense? That's when you roll over the funds into your IRA account. Aiden.
So you can't put any more money into that account at all?
So Aiden's question was, so you can't put any more money into that account at all. And I'm going to have to ask for clarification. When you say that account, what account are you talking about? The rollover IRA you can contribute to, but not the 401k because you've terminated. Now, how much can you contribute to the rollover IRA? That number is in your studies this week. You need to do a little research and find out in 2022 how much can you contribute to an IRA. And there's two kinds of IRAs. Essentially, there's the traditional tax deductible IRA that you're going to learn about this week in your studies. And then there's the Roth IRA, which is the tax-free, not just tax deferred, but tax-free. So the IRA, Aiden, this account, you can put, I'll just tell you this year, I can put $7,000 if I want to in my IRA and get a tax deduction. Or I can put that same $7,000 into a Roth IRA and have no deduction, but I have tax-free growth. So I have to choose, do I think taxes are going to go up in the future? And what about my income? What about my tax situation? Are my taxes going to go up in the future? So I make a pretty good paycheck right now. So I pay taxes. So maybe I want the tax deduction now, but then when I retire and I start taking money out of my IRA, I'm going to have to pay taxes on every dollar I take out. Or alternatively, if I fund my Roth IRA and I don't get a tax deduction, then later on, when I start taking money out of my Roth IRA, I don't have to pay any tax on the growth. So if I invest my $7,000 year after year in a Roth IRA, and it grows and it does really well because I'm an aggressive investor and I make a lot of money in my Roth IRA, then when I go camping or I decide to buy a new camper, RV, out of my Roth IRA, I don't have to pay any taxes on it. As opposed to this one, this tax deductible traditional IRA, it's just like my 401k. I'm getting a tax deduction, but what happens when I take the money out? I have to pay taxes on it. You see, that's the big distinction. If you can understand that this week, the distinction between the tax deductible IRA and the tax-free Roth IRA, it'll be a big gift to you. Because at some point, you're going to have to decide, in addition to your 401k, do you want to have tax-free money growing? Or do you want it? Are you making enough money where that tax deduction is worth more to you today than tax-free income later? That's the big challenge for a financial planner. So now we've talked about the 401k and how you transition from the 401k into a rollover IRA, but we still didn't answer your question about the contributions that were matched by the employer. Aiden says you get to take those with you into your IRA, but you don't continue to get them moving forward. You don't get the match moving forward, which is true, but it only half answers the question. And I want to make sure we answer the question. Do you get to take the match with you when you roll over your money? The money that the company matched in your 401k, if you leave that employer and you go to another employer, do you get to keep the match? It's an important question. Ashley says no, and she's right. But she's only partly right because there's a what if. It depends. It depends on what? If you were the owner of the company and you're incentivating employees, you're giving them extra money to be your employee by giving them a match. That's what the match is. It's incentive. It's a benefit for an employer to give to their employees to say, come work for us. We have a better benefit package. We want you to come work with us. What does that employer not want to do after they trained you and invested in you learning the business from the inside out? What is it they don't want you to do? Leave. They don't want you to leave and go to their competition. That's why they gave you that benefit. And that's why they have something called vesting, which usually is 3 years for your match. So in other words, if you go to work at Shell and you get that 8% match, and that's not really what Shell pays, I just make that up to make it look really good. But whatever the match is, if you work for that company and after 2.5 years, let's say Marathon offers you $10,000 more a year, if you come to work for them right now, now you're going to be making $110,000 a year and you leave and you roll over your old 401k into your IRA. Guess what happens to the match? 2.5 years you worked there. So for 2.5 years, you've been putting in that monthly $8,000 a year, whatever that turns out to be per month. You lose it completely. So now that $10,000 extra a year to go work for another company, and you're losing $8,000 a year for 2.5 years instantly. Well, what if it doesn't work out at Marathon? Maybe you should wait until year 3. Maybe that opportunity won't be there. It's a decision you have to make, but you need to make that decision as an informed employee, knowing that you're not going to get to keep your match if you jump from job to job, employer to employer. That they're not going to let you keep that match. Okay? Yes, sir.
So this example you just gave me for 2.5 years. So what if I went to go work at Marathon, but I still kept my job at Shell for those other 6 months? I worked both jobs and then quit after the 3 years ended.
That's a great question. If you go to that other company and you work there, but you keep your old job, either you're going to get arrested or somebody's going to.
Like I know of someone that's working 2 jobs and he's getting paid from both jobs full time, and he's making 6 figures from both jobs, but he's not getting that much work from both.
Yeah.
So like if he stays for those 3 years.
It sounds like that person is a consultant in a consulting role as an independent contractor. Typically, I'll just tell you, there's no company in the world that's going to hire you as a full-time employee to get the benefits of the 401k and let you work at another company. Now, Shell would fire you as soon as they found out you were working for another company, usually. Because if you're an employee, that's how you qualify for the 401k. I teach at the University of Houston, and I make pretty decent money doing this. But I don't get to participate in their retirement plan because I'm an adjunct. But if I was an employee of the University of Houston, I couldn't have my own company and run my own company and do other things that I can do now. Typically, that's just not allowed. But sometimes it is, and things are changing out there. But I'll just say that your question about working at 2 companies is just not a likely scenario, at least in my experience. But if you could get away with it, that'd be the thing to do, is keep that job until you get to the end of your 3-year vesting and then leave, because you want to know that date. I had a client who he was very talented, very aggressively going up the corporate ladder, but he kept jumping from company to company to do that, and he never got to keep any of his matching. It was like 10 years into his career, I'm like, dude, look at what you've missed out on. Like, that's, anyway, so just want you to know that. Okay, any questions so far? Yes, Ashley.
So if you don't get to keep the match, what rolls over into the IRA?
So what rolls over into the IRA, what you always get to keep is your contribution. So remember the scenarios, you're making it $100,000 a year, they have an 8% match. So how much are you absolutely going to contribute? $8,000. And when you leave, even if you leave in 2.5 years and you are not vested, that's your money. You still get to keep that. You just don't get to keep what the company matched. So instead of $16,000 in your account each year, you only got $8,000. So that's what you get to keep. That's what you get to roll over. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to check. It looks like I have something in. Some employers require you to stay for a certain amount of time before you can fully own your contributions and match. Esther, that's correct. And you're really correct about it. Depends on it's fully vested or not. But remember, one distinction I would make, Esther, is that you always get to keep your own contributions. There's no vesting for that. Okay, so that's just one distinction I would make in your question. Thank you for that. Okay, now let's jump into how much we're doing good on time. So what do you think the next bucket is? Hopefully I have a picture of the bucket. I'll be very sad if I don't. I'm looking for that bucket right there. It's got a shovel by it, but what do you think the little gold bucket is? It's smaller, it's gold. So we haven't really talked about the Roth IRA, but the gold bucket represents the Roth IRA. And the reason it's gold is because it's tax-free. It's the only tax-free type of account there is. And so I think of it as a little gold account. The reason it's smaller, the bucket is smaller than the IRA, is because you don't roll over your 401k into a Roth IRA. So you could, it would be nice if I could take my 401k money and just put it in a different type of bucket, but the IRS makes the rules, and that's one of the rules they just don't let you do. Now, you can do a Roth conversion. That's beyond the scope of this course. But at some point in your life, you're going to want to know about how can I convert my IRA into a Roth IRA, and what do you think has to happen if you take your IRA, your tax-deductible IRA? What do you think you would have to do if the IRS did let you convert that into a Roth IRA? Just knowing what you know about the IRS. Yeah, they'd want you to pay the taxes because they gave you a tax deduction. Now, before you can put it in that tax-free bucket, they want you to pay the taxes. And that's really what a Roth conversion is. It's, okay, let's pay the taxes, and now you can put it in that bucket. And that's a good thing. A Roth conversion can be a really powerful strategy for financial planning. And then it turns into a really good, helpful strategy for your investing, because if you did that, if you did convert your money from, the tax-deferred IRA into the tax-free Roth, and then you grew a lot of your assets, grew a lot in that Roth IRA, that's money you get to spend without paying any tax. So it can be a really powerful strategy. Another thing I'm just going to mention, again, this is beyond the scope. You don't need to know this for the quiz, but it's kind of interesting to know there's a thing called a backdoor Roth IRA and another thing called a mega backdoor Roth IRA. And here's how it works. It's for wealthy people, people that make too much money. And you're going to learn this week, that like JD taught me, the IRS makes the rules. They will only let you put so much money into a 401k. And they will only let you put so much money into a tax deductible IRA or a Roth IRA. Excuse me. In fact, if you make too much money, you exceed the income limits for a Roth IRA, that beautiful gold bucket. If you make too much money, you can't put money in a Roth IRA. So rich people aren't allowed to do that. So then we came up with a thing called the backdoor Roth IRA for rich people. Here's how it works. Instead of putting money in a Roth IRA, we put money into an IRA, but you don't get a tax deduction because you make too much money. But you can put a lot of money into an IRA even though you don't get the tax deduction. And then you just turn around and you move it into your Roth IRA. It's called a backdoor Roth IRA. You would think that the federal government would be too smart to let you do something that tricky. I mean, it's super, super simple. I make too much money to fund a Roth IRA, so I'm just going to take some money and put it into a regular IRA. And then I'm going to turn around and transfer that money into a Roth IRA. And now I have a super big Roth IRA. It's called a backdoor Roth IRA. And there's another one called a mega backdoor Roth IRA. It's a wealthy person's trick. It's the reason why we get paid money to do what we do. It's not so much the investment returns. It's the way we can help you. I always say the second law of personal finance, the law of tax advantaged investing. The IRS makes the rules. Your job, I'm going to do like Joe Biden now. Your job is to take advantage of it. Right? It's your job to take advantage of those rules. And the backdoor Roth IRA and the mega backdoor Roth IRA, those are two strategies that wealthy people use to take advantage of the IRS code. So again, that's beyond the scope. You don't need to know that for your capstone or for your quiz, but it's kind of interesting. The point is, this little gold bucket is a little treasure because it's tax-free, okay? So again, the contribution limit, how much you can put into this year in 2022, I could put $7,000, which I did, into my Roth IRA. And I can put $7,000 into my wife's Roth IRA, which I did, even though she has no what? She doesn't work, so she has no what kind of income? Earned income. That's on the quiz, earned income. And so it's a cool thing. That's what JD taught me is his wife didn't have earned income, but he was able to contribute to her Roth IRA. Now I said I could put $7,000, which I did, into my Roth IRA and my wife's Roth IRA. How much do you think you could put into your Roth IRA if you had earned income? 6. Why 6? Cindy says 7. She's wrong, unfortunately. Aiden said 6. Why did you say 6? Just made it up. I don't believe him. I think he Googled it. His laptop's open. So here's the deal. If you're over 50, which I happen to be, I turned 60 on my birthday, Friday. I feel so old. It's painful. But if you're over 50, there's a thing called a catch-up provision, which allows you to put a little extra in, an extra 1,000. So that's why I can do 7, you can do 6. And I could either do it in a tax-deductible traditional IRA, or I could do it in the Roth IRA, or I could split the difference. Does that make sense? Sounds a little wacky, but it is what it is. You can do a total of that amount per year. In my case, $7,000. In your case, $6,000. And you get to choose either or both. I don't know why you do both. I think you want to pick one and go with it. And usually, almost always, I recommend the Roth IRA, because the tax deduction you're going to get for $6,000 a year isn't significant to move the needle, but over time, the accumulation of a tax-free account, if you invest well, can really make a difference later. There's some other rules that will be on the test, the quiz. One of them is the RMD rule. I want to tell you about RMD. Not that you care, you won't care until you're 70, because when you're 70, this rule, it's called RMD, required minimum distribution. It means you have to take money out of your IRA. Not your Roth IRA, though. So let's say that I've done really well and I've saved a lot of money and I have a pile of money in my Roth IRA and I have a pile of money in my IRA because of all those rollovers I did and I invested well. Let's say I've got $1 million in my IRA and $500,000 in my Roth IRA. My IRA, when I turn 70, I have to start taking out like $7,000 a year, whatever that formula is for the RMD, required minimum distribution. That is on the quiz. And I give you all kinds of words for it to try to trick you. But it's required minimum distributions. You need to know what a distribution is. It's something that goes out of your account. A minimum required distribution, they're required in an IRA, but not in a Roth IRA. And that can be a pretty significant thing, because what does that mean? It means this income that you have to take, now you have to pay taxes on it. You don't get a choice. But if it comes out of your Roth IRA, there's no RMD, there's no required minimum distribution. It can just sit there and grow and grow and grow, which is what most people that are wealthy do with their Roth IRA. It's like the last bucket they want to touch. And that's allowed because the IRS doesn't have the RMD rule on the Roth like they do on the IRA. So that's one reason why wealthy people like to do the conversion and the backdoor Roth, because they want to have an account where they don't have to do any RMDs, required minimum distribution. My voice is about done, and I'm about done. We have come to very close to the end of the discussion. I want to jump in real quick and just give you a little bit of a highlight of your assignment this week. And we're really pretty much out of time. But I've got some videos in here that I thought you might enjoy. They're not very long. They're very informative. So watch those videos. I want you to understand who's eligible, some of the benefits. I want you to write a 300 to 500 word article this week. And I want you to do a little research and find a couple of resources that are helpful for you. Just do a Google search, find an article or two and a video or two, and just make that part of your report. So like, you're going to have some questions as you go through this, and hopefully those questions will prompt you to do a little research. Part of this assignment is show me your research in this assignment. So that's that. And then finally, this week we do have some updates you're going to want to do in your financial planning portal. You've already added your 401k, right? You've already added that account. You went to your net worth, you went to investments, you added the account, and you even funded it, right? You even put money in it. Pretend money, but money. Well, this week, you're going to do the same thing for an IRA and for a Roth IRA. So that's part of the assignment, is for you to go into your plan and create an account for a Roth IRA and create an account for an IRA. And that way, when you do, and you'll see it in the assignment, when you set up your plan, one of the things you're going to see is your tax allocation. Very important part of a financial plan is how much money do you have that is tax-free, how much do you have that's tax-deferred, and how much do you have that's actually taxable. So you're going to have those three types of accounts in your plan. So it's really super simple to do, but it's part of this week's assignment. And then finally, this is probably the most challenging part, is to do and these are all the screenshots you're going to have. That's in your assignment. The last thing is, I want you to do an outline of today's lesson. I'm not sure I'm going to keep this in the assignment, but basically what it is, trust me, you guys are here, and I would not have you do this assignment. So if you're in class, you're exempt. Okay, you don't have to do this part. This is just an outline. I want you to outline what I said in this lecture. I give you a little how to do it. I want it to be timed. So if you're in class, you don't have to do that. If you're in Zoom, I want to make sure you were paying attention. So I want you to just kind of outline it. You can go back and watch it, just take some notes and give me an outline. If you're not in the Zoom, you definitely need to do this. So that's the whole purpose here is we've got a lot of students who don't show up for Zoom. They don't show up for class. They ask questions. They're behind. This is for you. Okay, this lesson I want you to outline. If you're in class, you're exempt. Just tell me that. And I know who's in class today. So we have a whopping 78 people in class right now. Right now. So don't try to trick me or you will get a big 0. And I will take you to the dean. Don't try to trick me. Seriously. I don't. Anyway, so that's it. Any questions? The assignment really isn't that difficult. The most difficult part is the part you just got exempted from, which is the outline, which is important for the students who aren't on the Zoom call and aren't in the classroom. So those students really need to do this, and I'll be looking at that outline. So everything else is pretty cut and dried, pretty simple. Next week, we will not be in class. I'm assuming that I'm going to be able to sell this to my 11:30 class. I'm pretty confident that I will be able to. So I'm going to spend time between now and next week creating a good workshop video. I will be in the Zoom meeting. We will have a Zoom meeting, and that I'll be there to answer questions. So you're all welcome to join me on the Zoom call, even though it will be a video, and I'll be checking my chat. And then after the video, if I have time to prepare the video, I'll play the video, and then I'll come on and I'll answer questions. I'll probably do both. I'll come on and talk to you, and then I'll play a video, and then I'll answer questions. But the whole time I'll be available by chat. Does that make sense? So next week we will be in a Zoom meeting at 10 a.m. There will not be an 11:30 session, assuming I can sell this to my 11:30 class. Okay, if you don't have any questions, you're dismissed. If you do have questions on Zoom, please post them now, and I will look and answer them. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer too. Okay, I'm going to shut down the broadcast. I'll keep the Zoom meeting open, but I am going to finish the broadcast. Thank you for watching on YouTube.